Hello and welcome to the Empowered Couples Podcast, where here you get modern, non-boring relationship advice for you and your partner to communicate like pros, fight smarter, and stay on the same team no matter the challenge that you face. I am one of your hosts, Aaron Freeman.
And I'm Jocelyn Freeman, but you all just know us as the Freemans.
And this episode title is simply Steps to Rebuild a Marriage.
And you said simply, however, this process isn't necessarily easy, right? We're going to lay out what can feel complex in a way that you feel like you have a path. Because the truth is, you've heard us say this before, but there are going to be hard days in marriage. Hopefully they're fewer and farther between, but we know that some of you, because we work with couples every day, are in a hard season. And maybe you have felt like it has gone on for months, maybe even a year. And when it is going on for a long period of time, it is a signal that you often need an outside perspective to help you navigate through. But the point is that when you're in a prolonged season of it feeling challenging, you likely have built up resentment from things that haven't been repaired. You have prolonged low love accounts. You've heard us talk about that feeling of not being loved, connected, appreciated. And sure, we can all bounce back from one day here and there feeling that way, but if it feels persistent, it can be harder. And then also there's more frequent conflicts from things that could have been small or simple conversations, right? And when you're in it, we know that you feel more dissatisfied, you feel worn out, you feel confused. And some of you, when this lasts, can get to a place of really questioning the relationship as a whole. And look, we want you to know you're not alone if you are in this, or you have been, or maybe you will be, right? Because the goal for, at least I think that a goal for all of us, is to stay together for decades. And in that long period of time, if it isn't right now, you might encounter a hard season, and we want you to be prepared for it at any time.
This was the first week that I've gotten this question so direct in a while. And the one partner, when we were on a session, asked me again directly, can we repair and rebuild from here? And our question, to the question, our answer is always yes, but it's not just blanket yes and then nothing else.
It's
That's
asterisks.
The whole point of this episode, that there are very specific steps to rebuild a marriage. And we want to go through each step because you want to know what the steps are and then identify where in the process are you. You can also see what steps are coming ahead, but you can also determine in the moment if for some reason you yourself can't get past one of the steps. We believe everyone can, but if things have happened and you as one individual in a partnership feel I cannot move past this step, then no, the marriage will not be rebuilt. So it's not as simple as can every relationship be rebuilt? It is yes, but not if you are not willing or get stuck at one of these steps we're about to outline.
So true. Willingness is the key thing throughout these traits. And I'm going to kind of pull a page from your playbook before we go into the steps, Aaron.
Oh, I didn't know we had separate playbooks.
Well, what I mean is you're great at analogies. So you guys have some grace for me. I'm going to try this out. But I was thinking as you said that I know it can feel like, again, overwhelming. Where do we start? Can we rebuild this thing? Look, you're not trying to necessarily rebuild the entire structure. I want you to think of the analogy of like a building or a home. We're not saying that you need to burn the entire thing to the ground. It's all in shambles. It's like basically a whole demo. No, usually what is missing, you're going to see in these steps, is that the foundation isn't as strong, right? You might have great windows and a new roof and, nice decor inside, but your foundation needs to be rebuilt. And I just wanted to offer you that visual so that you don't think everything is bad within the partnership or this quote unquote home. So, all right, take it or leave it. My visual, I'm trying with the analogies.
That's good.
Okay.
I'll take a page out of your playbook. I know you're going to say later that every marriage and every relationship that goes on for decades are going to have different chapters. And sometimes you might need to write a whole new book. And so to use your analogy, let's say you did demo a house. Well, you don't need to build it to be the exact same house. Like maybe you had a one story, but you could build a 2-story.
Yeah.
It's like maybe you had a ranch style, maybe you want a farmhouse, maybe you want like modern organic, maybe you want some other different kind of style, right? Maybe you want an apartment complex. So I know we're getting a little bit humorous here, but you have to really think of the relationship, because how many people have we talked to? It's like, oh, well, I need to go back to the way it was. No, it's impossible.
We even tell couples that actually you're not going to go back because
Nor
you're
do
different
you want
people.
to.
Right?
Well, exactly. Yeah, you, with your life experiences, where you've grown, maybe even some of the traumas that you've taken on, the perceptions, you can't go back to the person that you were. So the person you were for that relationship can't have the same relationship be now.
Yes. And know that, again, if you're going to be together for a long period of time, it doesn't mean you're necessarily flawed or broken. There's just work to do. So why don't we just get into the steps? I think we've added a lot of context for you all, and we hope that you feel a sense of encouragement and hope as we go through these steps. Again, if you are willing. So Aaron, you want to kick it off with the first step?
So the first step is you have to put all of the hurt, we'll just label it all as hurt. You have to put all the hurt aside. All the things that will need to be repaired eventually. You have to set it all aside to determine what your authentic commitment is. And this can be a little bit like what your vision is. Later on, you can get to your core values, but basically the type of life that you want to go forward for yourself and the partner that you want to be creating that with. And is this partner the partner that you are willing and committed to going down this path with? Now, if you're married, we do want to invite you into that this is not just a simple question, as in, oh, I know the life I want to create, and no, this isn't my person.
Well, especially if you have kids, that's not an easy, just like, oh, no, I don't think this is working out, I'm out, right?
Yeah, and for multiple reasons. One, you made a promise, number one. Number two, you have responsibilities. Number three, a lot of the initial decision making to say something like that is coming from all of the hurt and the trauma and the things that are built up. So we understand where that is coming from, but you really have to say, like, let me actually put generally the past in the past for a second, and then just look forward. What is my authentic commitment? And from this moment forward, I am going to stick to it. Now, I have one invitation here for men. This also came up on a session this week. There is something to say that is a lot more than just the words that you say, I am committed to you, or I am committed to the marriage or the relationship. It really is very strongly related to the attitude and the way of being that you have of certainty, of confidence and decisiveness, that regardless of what has happened, regardless if we yet have the tools or know how to go forward, I am declaring to you, not only in word, but in attitude, that you can count on me. I am committed to this. And I want to say this for men, that you may have to lead in the beginning, and maybe your partner isn't like walking side by side with you. Maybe the imagery is more like you're kind of walking ahead, holding your partner's hand that's trailing behind you a little bit. Because you're both hurt. So who the heck else is going to step up and lead? Two hurt people? No. It's like, what is my commitment? And then so this authentic commitment has to be in an attitude like this, and then declare it to your partner. And then they say, I hear you. Like, I want to be on board with you, some version of this. And, I know I have things like in trust that I need to be built back up. And you say, totally fine. There is a lot that we need to repair, trust, things that have happened, love accounts, all that. And trust me, hold my hand, I'll lead this as we go.
And it was amazing because when you really were inviting that partner in particular to step more into that, because they were saying the words, and she even said that, like, okay, you're saying these things, but I don't feel it. And when you kind of modeled that for him, she literally started tearing up because she felt the certainty in you modeling how that was said, that real drive and that commitment. And so you're completely right. That way of being has to be conveyed, not just the words being said. I love that point about the commitment. And I just want to add before we go to the second step that we aren't even necessarily saying you're committed to being in a relationship that's like the same one that you're in now for the rest of your life, right? That's not what we're saying. We're saying if the two of you go, all right, we got stuff to work on. There are things to work through, repair, talk about, get better at, but I'm committed to the future of what we could build. That's what you're saying yes to, not, I'm committing to the same old, okay? So with that said, as we go into these next steps, which a lot of them are about kind of conversations to be having, I think it's important to say, and may seem obvious, but it needs to be clear, you have to be able to hear each other. Because the next steps are going to be somewhat challenging conversations. There's going to be things that you hear your partner say or that you need to express, and you won't get anywhere if you aren't willing to hear each other. And that's honestly one of the big things that it takes, is to be willing to hear the hard things, to embrace it, to go, oh, whoa, that kind of is hard to hear you say that, but you know what? I can see your point. And I am willing to face that, and I am willing to work on that. So I just want to emphasize, as simple as it may sound, you won't be able to get anywhere if you don't hear each other in these next conversations.
Yeah, and that sounds simple. I want to reiterate, the other option is you hear the words they're saying and then you provide some sort of
excuse.
Wow, yeah, straight to it.
Well,
yeah, it's an excuse. It's a level of defense, of a validation, of some sort of counter to, well, you shouldn't have taken it that way. Mm-hmm. Look, you got to put all that aside right now. Mm-hmm. You just have to hear, and, to our repair process, there's impact. You just need to hear the impact. And just, I know we're kind of giving some away, but it's like you need to move into a realm in which your partner feels validated or understood in the impact, and you start to take some of your responsibility for the actions that led to that, right? Yep. So this step is really about hearing that and not discounting what they're saying.
Yep.
And we really are moving through this as we go into step 3 into like the very micro emotional needs that need to be stepped through, right? Because you don't just, I said this on a call just an hour ago, right? It's like they had they had stairs and they had a landing. It's like if you want to get to the landing, you don't just go from the ground floor to the landing. Like literally that's why there are steps. And so you really have to see yourself going through each step, not just going from like, oh yeah, we need to rebuild a marriage. Okay, like let's do that.
We're in love again, yeah.
So the third step is to reveal what your fear is to move forward together. Now notice how that's a lot different than if I was to say to you from the start, here's what I fear, but I've declared my commitment. So what I'm saying is I am committed to moving forward, and I am now revealing what fears are there for me or things that cause me some hesitation, though I am committed to moving forward.
And the reason why that is important, you might seem kind of like, that's a little odd, Freemans, but the reason why that's important is because it's like, it's clutter. So if you don't say it, it's going to be there. And so again, this is all about transparency and getting it on the table. And so we have to first reveal the concerns. It could sound something like, I'm afraid that, you won't actually be able to love me as much as before. Because I need to be able to just get that off my chest. There's something so freeing about just saying what is a concern for us. Another fear, Aaron, can you think of one?
Yeah. Recently I heard a version of, and this is going to be my word, but I fear being hoodwinked because they had a sense that there were certain things being hidden. So the fear was if I step in and trust that what if it's only a matter of time between I'm blindsided, like I'm hoodwinked by these intuitions I felt were there all the time.
Yep, exactly. So it can be an array of things. It can be one thing you're afraid of. It could be three, but you're just hearing each other. There's nothing to even fix about what the other person says. It's just like, thank you for sharing that with me. Really, just receive it. Just be with it. Maybe if there's a little reassurance, but again, no excuses. That will only derail the conversation. Or if you invalidate it or in any way, you can see how you would backtrack completely. So that is step number 3. Step number 4 is realize that the old relationship has to end. You may have seen us do a post on this in July, because we actually talked about how on our anniversary of our first date, we really just shared that a few years prior, we had ended the old version of our marriage. We didn't end the marriage. We're still in the marriage. We just ended the old version. And this is something we really invite couples to consider as a possibility. Like Aaron had said it earlier on, like sometimes it's that there either needs to be a new chapter or an entirely new book. That's a healthy step. That's likely going to happen if you're together for a long time. So again, it doesn't mean necessarily that you have to burn the entire thing to the ground. Maybe it's a full demo for some people, right? But for a lot of people, it's the foundation. You know what? We got some cracks in the foundation and maybe we do need a new roof, for example. Again, just sticking with the analogy. So it's about identifying within the relationship what parts have to end. So for us, Aaron and I, when we did this exercise a few years ago, we clarified what are the patterns. What are the behaviors that cannot move forward? And again, this takes radical self-honesty because you're not just dictating it to the other person. Like, it's not like, okay, Aaron, here, let me tell you the things that you have to stop. Sure, there might be some of that, but the more productive step would be to say what within yourself needs to change. Because imagine your partner doesn't even have to say it. You say it. You say that even if it's like, oh man, that's acknowledging the part of myself that I wish that wasn't a part of me. You know, or, oh man, I wish I hadn't gotten into that habit. Just self-honesty, have compassion for yourself as you share it too.
I hadn't even thought about this, but it's a great point you bring up. I would say as you go through these steps, actually have that be what you focus on, being the patterns for yourself. Because as we move into this next step, you'll create some reciprocity for the next question. But before I get there, I also want to say, patterns of behavior, things even like what are my personal preferences or things of like instant gratification that, I don't know, sometimes I even label as my personal self-care. So this including obviously like all of your patterns of reacting and getting defensive and making withdrawals and like how you argue and your lack of responsibility and where you've made promises and haven't kept them. And like there's a whole gamut, right? But just really including those particular things about yourself. Because if you were to say that to your partner and you both get to do that, watch as we move into the next step. It's you have to agree to the deal breakers or non-negotiables of the other partner.
Yep.
So I guess what you could say is, well, you want to bring what your deal breakers and non-negotiables are to the table. And this is going to be a big step because you've got the commitment. You've been willing to hear your partner. You're revealing your fear. You realize that patterns within yourself and you're acknowledging here are the patterns that I am going to have to work on and let die. And here are my non-negotiables. Like I'm committed, but I really need to see this pattern kind of stop in you. So this is going to be a really key step that maybe some people feel like they can't get past for some reason. We'd invite you all into don't let this stop you. Like you should be able to be willing to hear what your partner puts forth. But okay, so hey, as we go forward, as we're having this relationship die, here's where I see for myself, but here's basically what I need to see change. My non-negotiables. to continue.
And hopefully they're very similar to each other. Like they aren't shocking things. Like, for example, couples will say things like, one of my non-negotiables is that we are respectful in the way that we communicate with each other. And of course, defining even more clearly what respect is. And you have heard us, it was actually last episode that we talked about creating 4 agreements for times of conflict. That's a very tangible way to ensure that conflict in particular stays respectful. But that's one example of where hopefully you guys agree on these things. Some of them might be changes that, one of you in particular needs to focus on. So, we're talking a lot about communication changes, conflict changes, but it could also be very scenario specific or habits. For example, if drinking has become a challenge within the partnership, it's actually affecting your lifestyle. It may be, hey, a non-negotiable for me is that blank, fill in the blank, some kind of an agreement around drinking. Or it could be around spending time with a particular person, a family member or a friend that you feel isn't a good influence, ending a certain habit. Can you think of any other specifics?
Or you were hitting close to it. I mean, sometimes with like maybe work hours and not feeling prioritized there.
Help around the house.
Yeah, help around the house. I would also say with work, we've heard a few of these, that there's a certain individual of the opposite sex that the partner feels like insecure about. Yeah. And so the agreement might be around communication with that person, or let's say not doing like one-on-one lunches, even if it's work, with someone of the opposite sex. So we're just sharing like things that we've heard. So yeah, there's a number of non-negotiables, but there's likely a few things, because otherwise you probably wouldn't be in this place of feeling it needs to be rebuilt.
Exactly, because this is the foundation, right? And any relationship, any business partnership, anyone who is on a sports team together, anyone that wants to actually thrive and succeed, they have clear agreements and expectations. It isn't a shock that there are non-negotiables, right? It's like that's a part of anyone who's going to build a life together. So it isn't about control. I want you to delete that from your mind. This isn't about controlling each other. This isn't about making each other into different people. This is what's the foundation for us? What are the non-negotiables that have us both feel loved, secure, and that we're in a strong, solid partnership together? So that's that step. You want to go into
I would say
next?
One step further, this conversation is probably also a lot about the withdrawals. So not just about what has us feel a team and feel good. It's like, this has really been taking away from my love account, and like I really need these things to stop.
Absolutely. So that is the step around getting clear and agreeing on deal breakers and non-negotiables. It's important to have those written down, not just things that you're trying to memorize. Erin, you want to go into the next step?
So this is number 6, and I'm going to break this into maybe A and B. So first of all, you have to be clear now about what you need to be repaired from. Okay, that seems obvious. We have Making Up and Moving Forward guide, our book, the whole 5R process. Like this is it. This is
repair.
This is the repair, but this is just putting out there to your partner, here's what I need to be repaired from.
Yeah.
B is actually having the repair conversations. Now, why I make this into 2 is because you're not having this conversation likely all at one time.
No,
like
it could be a
the
lot.
whole thing we're talking about in this podcast, probably broken into a few conversations. And specifically, when we get to this, number 6, you may need to put on the table, here's what I need to be repaired from. And maybe you write it out also. And then maybe you both need to like digest what the other person has put down.
We actually had a couple do that in the last week or 10 days. We had them email them first to each other, because sometimes hearing it verbally at first, I don't know, it can be triggering. It can be harder to take in. So reading can feel a little bit more non-threatening, and you have time to process, to think through it. So that can be a constructive step to take. There isn't a perfect way with this. Maybe you can sit there and talk, topic by topic and hear each other. For others, it may be more helpful to actually send them to each other and to read. And do you want to give some examples, or was there more you wanted to say to that?
No, I'll just preface, like they were doing that under our guidance.
Yeah.
So they even wrote an email out draft, sent it to us. sometimes it can come out as very blamey and finger pointing. So I wouldn't suggest you write this email out and just send it to your partner and say like, oh, the Freemans told me to email this. If it's full of like a bunch of criticisms and finger pointing and blaming them.
No, this is, you guys are agreeing to this process. Do not blindside your partner. They have no idea what you're listening to, and then you send them this. They're ideally listening to this with you and going through the process.
And there's also, this is step 6. So I just want to make sure like you're doing all these other things ahead of this too. So then it leads you to having the conversation. So however you get them communicated to each other. And then again, like you said, good that the other partner has a sense.
Yeah.
So then it's time for the conversation. So this is the use of the 5 R's. And I just want to say, depending on where you're both at, well, maybe one of you needs to go first and have the other be the listener and the one looking to validate and take responsibility, because these might be bigger things. They might be things that have gone on for a while.
Yeah.
And maybe you just need to do one part. Maybe you need to do one thing that's not repaired for one partner, and maybe you need to digest that again. And then maybe you come back to either another one for them, or maybe you do a thing or event that you're not repaired by, and then they become the listener. So there's no rush of this conversation. Yeah, if you guys were really great at repair and there wasn't a lot, maybe you do it in one conversation, but it doesn't
it's going to
be
different. Yeah. Per situation, per couple. So you don't want to rush it, like you said. And before we go to the next step, I just want to say, for those of you who go, but Freemans, are you just saying like bring up old stuff? And, why, especially some people who are more conflict avoidant, they go, why are we talking about something from 2 years ago? We're not asking you to bring up things that are truly resolved and you have repaired, you have taken responsibility, all the things. It's when there's still a little bit of an open wound. Like it didn't really fully get addressed. There's still pain around it. There hasn't been actually enough healing and change. And I'll just give you a couple examples just so that you kind of know the examples. Well, one couple, this was several months ago that we were working with them, but she was actually still feeling a lot of effect from the level of support she received/didn't receive when she had a newborn. And it was something that really affected her and that she kind of couldn't get past. And so it was part of where her reactions were coming from and why she was more distant. So it's, again, not that she's just dragging up old things that are small. It's like, no, I was significantly impacted by how that newborn stage went. Obvious ones could be any like breach of trust within the relationship, right? Whether it's having talked to someone else or having spent time with someone else, those obviously are really clear breaches that would need repair. Aaron, was there something you're about to add in as an example?
Not as an example, but then I think I forgot. But even not outside the marriage or relationship, it's like I need to be repaired from the amount of criticisms I feel I get, or something in your communication, or
how you've talked to,
how you've repaired. Oh, I just remembered.
Yeah.
Just because you've talked about something does not mean it's repaired.
Boom.
Or just because you feel repaired by something doesn't mean that your partner is repaired.
Exactly.
So it doesn't mean it's repaired for the marriage. So 2 things to consider. Yeah, again, talking about something doesn't repair it. And just because you feel good doesn't mean that it's actually been repaired for the marriage.
That's true. So again, use our Making Up and Moving Forward guide to help support you through those steps. That's exactly why we have this, because we know that not all of you either have been able to see a counselor or a coach or book with us, for example, with private sessions. So that's why we have that guide. But okay, so now we have had those repair conversations. It may take time. Don't expect it to be a 1 hour and you're done. It might take weeks, a series of conversations. It depends. Now, once that does feel as if it is somewhat complete, Aaron, you want to take us to the next step?
Yeah, step number 7 is reestablish your core values and the future you both want to step into.
So those can sound like big things, right? But values, those are the things that really drive us in our life, hopefully, right? What do you value most as a couple? And maybe where you are now, they're different than what they were 5 years ago. And so again, if you are rebuilding a partnership, you are building back hopefully stronger and better. You can't go back, as we already said. So if you two sit down and say, okay, what do we value in this next season? We said this at our couples workshop last month. Maybe you say family is a core value for you, but your time hasn't been actually showing that. That actually hasn't been how you're living because you've been distracted by things, obviously responsibilities and things like that. But sometimes we need to audit our lives and go, where did we get off track? Where did we stop prioritizing what we actually value? And maybe we got caught up with other things. So we need to re-clarify them, write them. And we just like the number 4. So instead of it being like 10 values and things you're not going to remember, 4. We think 4 agreements for times of conflict, right? 4 core values. So sit together and clarify, moving forward, moving into the future, what do we want to be guided by? What do we value most in this next season? And then, as Aaron said, the future that you want to step into. So this could be more about your vision, your goals, what you want to achieve together. Maybe there are bucket list items to return to. Again, what do we want to do with our time? So this is really focusing on your vision. Where are we headed? And this is the perfect time of year to do something like this, right? Because we're coming towards the end of the year, about to not be that far from the beginning of a new one. So what do you want next year to look like? Do you want it to be the same as last year or just slightly different? Or no, do there need to be some changes to make? And maybe there are things that you need to, in reality, with your calendar, with your priorities, with your responsibilities, make changes. And for some people, it might be big changes. We've had couples say, you know what? I need to actually get a different job because this job is affecting our marriage. Or you know what? We need to move cities because we don't have any family support. And that is something that's really affecting our relationship. So it could be big or small, or it's, hey, we need to hire a sitter and we need to actually get some quality time together once a week. So what actual changes do you need to make in the future? So this whole conversation is future focused. What are we rebuilding towards? Because if we can't go back, then it's about going forward.
It just reminds me that at this step, there can be a lot of hope and optimism. It actually kind of leads into the last step. So I might as well give it. The last step is you have to step into becoming the people that you need to be to actually realize this life and vision together. Because you're not. You're not those people right now. So that's going to be a big barrier. If you think you're going to stay the same and create this new life, you're wrong. If you think you're going to stay the same and you're going to be able to have your partner or yourself feel any different than it has up to this point, you're wrong. You have to understand this is where you die. You have to kill off this version of yourself, which is really just a pattern of thought, emotion, and that drives behavior. And we call that our personality, funny enough, but that version has to die. And so this isn't something that happens all at once. So take all these steps that we've talked about. Maybe you do that in a week. Maybe you do that in a month. So you're really on the same page together. This next step is you being so focused and committed to the changes within yourself to be this partner and person that you need to be, and you have to show consistency in that.
Yep.
Otherwise, it will probably feel like other times that you tried to rebuild that
make false promises. Same. Yep.
Yeah, it's the same. Now, likely if you missed a number of the steps that we cover here today, so I think if you genuinely went through all of these steps, you'd be in a different spot. But I really wanted to say this because at the end of these first steps, you could feel, again, really good. Like you really clarified some things. You have the commitment.
Fresh start.
You're repairing, fresh start, optimistic for the future, on board with it. And if you don't do this last step, again, it's going to be almost crushing and defeating.
And a couple aspects of what that looks like. First off, there's the internal conviction, actually deciding to become that person. And there is a powerful thing that happens when you truly make a decision. Not, I hope I can be better. No, nothing's going to change if you hope you'll change and be better.
Yeah.
Okay. It is that conviction. And then second is following it up with action. So is that like having some kind of reminder system? Is that you are seeing a coach or a counselor on a recurring basis that reminds you, whether that's as an individual or a couple, or it's being in a program, it's going to retreats. Like we need reminders.
Accountability.
Exactly. Accountability, showing that you actually are putting your action and energy behind it so that you can prove to each other it's different. So
Whoa.
a lot has been said here. This is probably one you want to listen to 2-3 times, take notes on, get into action around. And, we don't want to minimize this and make it seem as if, oh, this is easy, you guys. It's like baking a cake. No, it's challenging. But anything worthwhile in life and in a marriage is challenging.
I find baking a cake challenging.
It is. Yes, agreed. But truly, take action on this, do this, believe in yourselves, attempt it. And you know what? If you stay stuck or you get caught somewhere because maybe a big trigger comes up, then hopefully you can seek wise counsel from someone, whether you have a mentor, not your mom, right? Not like someone who's going to have a biased perspective, but wise counsel. Maybe that is a counselor, maybe it's a coach, maybe it's a mentor. We would love to meet with as many of you as possible, but obviously we have to sleep and be with our baby. And so you're welcome to join our wait list for private sessions. You can do that on our website. But that's also why we have the resources that we created. Part of why, 90% of the reason that we created these instant access resources like our guides is because we felt bad we couldn't work with everyone, right? Like we can't do sessions around the clock. And there are so many of you that want tools, want support. And so even if you get on our wait list or you're trying to see another counselor, still our guides will help support that. You can get our Making Up and Moving Forward guide. I'd say that relevant to this topic, if you have these conversations and then you want to maintain it, the Family Meeting Guide. That is how you maintain and stay accountable to these promises that you make to each other, because there's a weekly check-in, a quarterly, and a yearly. So you want to have that family meeting guide. You can get those at meetthefreemans.com/links. That will also be in the show notes because you're going to see all of our resources there. But we are rooting for you guys. We believe in you, and we will talk to you on the next episode.